It's Kevin from Let Me Tech You, and this is the next video in the series for the Terraform Associate 003, kind of, I guess you could say, study guide. And in this video, we're going to be going over actually creating infrastructure, kind of laying out the file format for some of our new code, which, if you watch the latest video, we'll mainly be staying inside the one file here. But later on in some of the other videos, we'll get into actually separating some of this stuff out. So like I said again, we're going to be I'm going to be dealing inside Azure as far as the resources we'll be creating, and we're just kind of going to go ahead and start where we left off at on the previous video. So we already have our version and everything provided in our Terraform block, and this is just the required providers. Then you have a provider block. There's some additional things you can add in there if need be, like some aliases or version constraints. But I'm going to actually go ahead and from my last video, I'm just going to do greater than or equal to, because I want to download the latest provider, which I already have in there, but just inside my source file, I just want to make sure the version it understands is to use the latest one. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. And so for this video, some of the prerequisites is we're going to need obviously Terraform installed. You're going to need the Azure CLI installed, and then also an Azure account to be able to basically, run and do some of these things as far as building out infrastructure. Now, you can get a free account if you don't already have one. A lot of the stuff we'll do in these videos won't actually utilize a lot of resources, so you'll probably stay within the free tier, and especially after each video, we'll destroy anything that we built. That way that there's no chance of you running up a bill. And that's the other great thing about Terraform is when you do build certain infrastructure in your providers of choice, you'll easily be able to delete everything that's associated with them without having to accidentally leave something that you might have missed and secretly run up a particular bill. So you can, once you get all that set up, you'll just want to authenticate in. And to authenticate with the Azure CLI, you'll just do an AZ login. That'll pop up on the screen inside your browser, and then you'll go ahead and authenticate with the particular user that you created in your Azure environment. So now we're going to go ahead and write some of this configuration. So you want to take this and kind of go with what we have here. And I'm going to do a Terraform init. So we want to do that, but we also want the dash upgrade option. That's going to change our lock file to use the latest and our constraint to be anything greater than or equal to 3.0.0. So now that we have that set, we're going to get into actually building and understanding what's going on here. So we have our Terraform block, and this block contains any Terraform settings, like I said, the required providers. So this will be what Terraform will use to provision the infrastructure. So for each provider, which I'll bring up here, let me show you Terraform. So if we go to the Azure provider, browse providers, go to Azure, and we go to documentation. And as you can see, under the provider block, there are some, so you got features, client ID, environment, subscription ID, tenant ID. So these are some of the arguments that you can provide. You even have, let's look at, you can do what are called aliases, which I don't know if it shows it on, no, it doesn't show it on here. Let me see. Provider. Yeah, so I'll have to show you where that's at, but you can do things like you can set aliases up so that you can actually utilize that provider inside your code, whether it's trying to authenticate to another subscription, because you might actually have multiple Azure RM provider blocks that reference different Azure subscriptions within your tenant. But we'll focus on just leaving it as is and only using the one that we'll be authenticating to. So and then you also, like we went over the providers block, we also have what's called the resources block. And you can see that in here, which is called resource. Now, resources are anything that's used to basically deploy, obviously, resources. So if we come in here and I look for, like, say, virtual machine, which we'll be doing, you can see that it uses the resource block and then the resource name, or the the matching result over here for that resource. So and then the name of this so basically you got resource, the resource type, and then the resource name. Yeah, I meant to say type. So resource type and then name. So when it's referenced, it's Azure RM Windows.virtualmachine.example.name.resource group name.location. So this name here can be anything that you set it to be, as long as it's unique for this particular type. So if you have another virtual machine, it can't be example, but it could be example one, or VM, then VM1, VM2, so on and so forth. So now that we got the information initialized, let's go through and actually build a virtual machine. So it's real simple. A lot of these will give you example usage, and then you can provide additional blocks for things that you need. So as you can see, this is everything you'll need to actually deploy a virtual machine. So you need a resource group in Azure, you need a virtual network, you need a subnet for your network interface to live inside of. Then you'll create your virtual machine, which then provisions the OS disk and then the basically the OS type. So I'm going to go ahead and copy all of this here. So there's no reason to kind of reinvent the wheel while we're training here, but basically you can then you can change a lot of this. So like obviously you'll change your network address space, you'll create a new network name, so on and so forth. So I'm going to paste that all in there, and let's just go through and look at this again. So I'm actually going to change this to East US, and under location, if we go to resource group, and you want to go to where it says resources here, because you also have what are called, let me get this out of here. So resource group, and we'll click on resource group. And as you can see, we have location, and this is where you'll be able to you'll basically have to get this from Azure. So whatever location you want to deploy this into, you just want to make sure that you deploy it in the region that's basically closest to the things that you'll be deploying. So I'm going to go Central US. Bring that back up. And Central US. I'm going to call this main network. Keep the address space the same. These can all, as you can see, they all say example, and that's fine because we don't have another resource type indicating this same name. So we'll keep all those the same. We'll keep all that how it is. And now let's say, you wrote this out, and I'm going to make some oddball movements in the actual code blocks. And I'm going to show you why here. As you're writing code, sometimes these things can get tedious to have to try and match these up. And Terraform has a pretty neat command to actually get your code in a nice, presentable way. So once you got all your code written out, I'm going to go Terraform format. And as you can see, all those got moved back into the correct positioning. Now, once you do that, it's going to actually do that for anything that's inside that file. So if we had other folders or files inside here, like variables.tf, which we'll get into, like I said, later, but you may have something that says network.tf or vms.tf. All those would then go ahead and get adjusted as well. So now that we have that formatted and all of our code ready to go and save, we're going to do a Terraform plan. And then what this plan is going to do is basically going to create a state file. And what that's going to do is it's going to, if we had existing infrastructure in place in the cloud, it would basically say, hey, does this infrastructure that's on our local match what's in the cloud? And since we don't have anything, it's going to show that we have 5 things to add. And going through here, you kind of can see all the things that's going to be applied. Now you're going to see a lot of that's going to be known after apply, because some of these things aren't going to be known until we actually deploy this, like the IP address or what the private IP address is. We obviously know that we set the prefix and we made the name internal. So this is just things that's just shown that's going to be created. So then once we get that done, we're going to do a Terraform and then apply. And the apply is going to run through the same thing. It's going to make sure nothing else had changed in between you doing the plan and the apply. It's going to say, hey, do you want to accept these changes? And then that's when you'll go ahead and do a yes on that. So once that gets there, so it's asking us, hey, do you want to do this? And you're going to say yes. Now, obviously, if we had anything that says anything to change or something to destroy, that would mean that we made some change in our code that's actually going to destroy resources that are currently deployed in the cloud. Now, the great thing about Terraform is it doesn't have any understanding of what's currently deployed, so you won't overwrite anything unless you added additional things to your resource group after you deployed it from Terraform, and then you came inside of Terraform and deleted the resource group or some sort. None of those things would be preserved. So that's why it's always important to keep your changes in Terraform. So that way you can always know what needs to be added or removed later on in the future. So I'm going to let this deploy. This might take a little time, and then we'll come back and start right back up. Okay, so now that we have our virtual machine, virtual network, resource group, and everything created, we can basically now go in and see that our resources have been deployed. So under my example resources here, you can see I got my main network, example NIC, my virtual machine, and everything that was deployed through the code. So now if we want to, so now as you can see, we have our Terraform state file, and this is basically a representation of what our Terraform state is in the cloud. So if there were any changes that were made and we ran a plan against this state file, we would immediately know that something has been changed on our local or in the cloud, and that those need to be synced up somehow. So you can also inspect your code doing a Terraform show, or inspect your state files, I can say. So it's like in a more readable format, kind of so you can see your Azure RM network interface. You got your enabled accelerated networking, enable IP forwarding. So this is the way to kind of come in and see what was deployed. So, okay, if you don't want to, I would kind of recommend staying out of here and more so focusing on the commands that you'll want to know for the exam. So the Terraform show will allow you to inspect your state file and be able to see the things like the private IP address. Did we deploy a virtual IP or an outside IP address? You can maybe see that in here. The state file will also let me see where our virtual machine is. Here. So the state file does actually, I want to see if I can find where it's at. Okay, here. So as you can see, the state file actually keeps your passwords in clear text. So it's always recommended to secure your state file, whether it be in the cloud or Terraform cloud. But we won't go over that in this video. We'll do that in another video in terms of migrating this to like a storage account of some sort. So again, that's just an easy way to kind of, you can, view your state, do some troubleshooting. You can do a Terraform state list all the resources that were deployed. Terraform state -h will show you some of the other additional commands you can add to it. So Terraform state show -h. So it just shows the attributes of a resource in the Terraform state. So state equals state file. So we already have our state file. So we just did the Terraform show. So now that's it here. Basically, you can even do a Terraform validate. So let's see, Terraform validate. Actually, if we do a -h, because -h will help you understand a lot of the commands that you will want to run and understand what's going on. So as you can see, this configuration is valid. So that's just a way to kind of make sure you validate that your config is good. There's no problems or errors, or if you were running into some errors, it can validate those things and see what's going on. So once you do those things and you're good with understanding the actual understanding the resource blocks that we used, a lot of how all this is configured isn't as important as far as understanding that you got your resource blocks, you have provider blocks, your Terraform blocks, and then the resource type, then the resource name has to be unique. And then you got your Terraform plan, your Terraform apply, and then your Terraform destroy, which we'll do to get rid of everything. So Terraform destroy. And if you don't want to, basically, I would do the auto approve, but this will basically, it's almost like a plan, but in a destroy way to say, hey, you're going to be destroying these resources. Do you want to do this? We'll go ahead and hit yes once this comes up here. So again, that's it for this video. Next, we'll go into actually changing the infrastructure, which, basically is just a way to kind of, change some of the things that kind of are needing, and then what happens when you do make those changes. And then we'll get into some of the other stuff like storing off the remote state and getting that more secure. If you have any questions in regards to the video, drop me a comment down below. I'll be sure to get back with you. Again, thanks for tuning in and hope to see you next time.